We're practically surrounded by farms here, so tell me this. When farmers plant their crops, do they just throw their seeds all over the place? Just let them fall wherever as they wander through their fields? What I see are neatly laid out rows, carefully dug, turned over, well-watered, and seeded in a very intentional way. So what's the deal with this sower in the parable? He seems unconcerned about the practical and brutal realities of the natural world. Does he not know that creation was made subject to futility, as St. Paul puts it in the second reading? Does this parabolic sower not know the story of Genesis, where God says, "Cursed is the ground, and thorns and thistles it shall bear for you"? We don't live in the Garden of Eden anymore, where casually tossing seed on the ground would work. Work was always part of the plan, but after original sin, work, like planting crops, requires toil and involves risk. Why be so careless with the seeds? Does this seed sower still see the world like it was before original sin? Yes, actually. At least it's part of it. Jesus even calls out the disconnect between his parables and how people interpret them. They look but do not see. They hear but do not listen or understand. The crowds look at Jesus' teachings with fallen eyes, from within the limited perspective of the world broken by sin. Jesus is not fallen. He is the perfect man. As Son of God, he existed before original sin. We know primarily the broken form of the world we live in, but Jesus sees that and how it was meant to be from the beginning. And to understand Jesus, we must see the original design. I'm not saying we ignore the pragmatic realities of a broken and sinful world. Clothing, after all, only exists because of original sin, but Jesus definitely still wears clothes, and he expects us to. The New Testament takes modesty pretty seriously. At the same time, however, if you only ever see a broken car, you would have a hard time knowing how to make it run again. Making a car run requires you to at least be able to imagine what it was like before it was broken. When Jesus uses parables, he often does it to make us think, to make us work to understand, so we appreciate his teachings more. He also uses parables to shift our perspective out of the old, sinful, and fallen way of thinking into a more heavenly, eternal perspective. Christians should be practical about the fallen world we live in, but we should also know the original plan well enough to be able to correctly evaluate what truly matters in this life, broken and fallen though it is. Jesus does this with his teaching on marriage, for example. If all you know is the current broken version of the world we live in, it's not actually easy to see why polygamy, divorce and remarriage, or artificial contraception are wrong. From a purely survival, fallen world point of view, anything that allows you to reproduce more or gather more resources for your own offspring should be good. But Jesus says, from the beginning, it was not so. In order for an argument like from the beginning to work, you have to have some awareness of and appreciation for what the beginning is. Now, with careful effort, you can make a decent argument even in the fallen world, why you shouldn't mess with the basic formula of one man, one woman for life. But the reason Christianity holds its ground on marriage isn't sociology. It is perspective. We know how the metaphorical car of marriage is supposed to run. So we can look at the ways that the world tries to fix the broken version of marriage and say, yeah, that's not going to work. Even in a fallen world, the original design still matters. Following the original plan for marriage, for life, can often cost us in this broken world. But the long-term value of an eternal perspective outweighs the costs. So when this sower goes traipsing across the field, scattering seeds without an apparent plan, it's a reference to how farming was supposed to work. And when only some of the seed bears fruit, that's an acknowledgement of the current broken situation we are in. Now, it is a parable. It's not literal farming advice. So don't stop using the science and planning to run your farms well. The point is that God makes us fruitful when we trust His design more than our own limited perspective. Besides, Jesus tells us what this parable is actually about. Spread the gospel everywhere. Don't rely on worldly ways of thinking in order to share the gospel well. I'm not saying we don't plan for evangelization. I'm not saying we don't consider practical things like when, where, and how we can best reach unconverted hearts. But I am saying that a relationship with Jesus Christ, much like God's plan for marriage, is best understood with a divine perspective of the original plan, not a worldly one, which is just pragmatic to get along. With 10 years of priestly ministry, I'm still amazed at the unexpected ways some people have their conversions. All the time, people come to the church not because of a good retreat or a clever homily or a well-planned evangelization strategy, important and useful though those are. Sometimes they convert seemingly out of nowhere because of a silly anime character made up by the Vatican, because of a fantasy novel based on stories a dad told to his children at night. And just this past week, we met a woman who dramatically returned to her faith because she just so happened to go on vacation to Italy last year. And when Googling what to do in Italy, she discovered the 2025 Jubilee year. She had never heard of it till then. And while researching, how do I take advantage of that? It brought her back to the sacraments so deeply that she joyfully stopped a random seminarian in a parking lot grocery store just to say how happy she was to be Catholic and to see another Catholic. People claim that our teaching on contraception is hard to accept and a barrier to evangelization. But I know of people who became Catholic because of it. Catholics online today mock Pope Leo XIV's encyclical on AI, just like Catholics 100 years ago mocked Pope Leo XIII's encyclical on industrialization and fair wages and labor unions. But both of those documents continue to bring people to the church to this very day. So let me put it bluntly. If you want to go to heaven, you need to accept the gospel, the whole gospel. That means you need to also proclaim it by word and by the way you live in every aspect of your life. If you want to proclaim the gospel, then the most important thing isn't your strategy. It's not farming. It's your authenticity. Yes, learn the techniques and make the plans, but don't forget what the gospel ultimately is: truth and love. Truth, any truth, taught and lived with love can lead people to the gospel, no matter how difficult or obscure or impractical the truth might seem. Church teaching on caring for the environment, or on abortion, or on a just wage, or on contraception, or on immigration, or marriage, or racism, or the liturgy. Lots of people pick and choose sides from that list of teachings while claiming to be Catholic. Doing that will make your heart into a hardened path, or rocky soil, or fill it with thorny weeds. Use prudence, but never forget that you belong to a heavenly garden, not an earthly one. Sow the seed of the gospel, the whole gospel, in every part of your heart. Strive to accept every teaching of the church. And if you have questions about what is official teaching, go to the catechism. Don't use Google AI. And as you go through this fallen world, strive to scatter every seed of the gospel in every part of your life, every part of the world. And though that kind of life will cause us to suffer, remember how the world was supposed to be. By God's grace, even the soil itself hopes to share in the glorious freedom of the children of God, Paul tells us. And we are those children, and if we trust in that hope of creation itself, if we sow the seed of the gospel with heavenly abandon, we too shall bear fruit 100 or 60 or 30-fold.